Right, David, thanks for coming on. It's great to have you. So
My absolute pleasure.
Thank you. Whereabouts are you?
We're based in southern Queensland, so near the Gold Coast in Australia.
Yeah. And which company do you represent?
So I work for a company, or the founder of a company called AgUnity.
Okay.
And what we really do is work with very low income farmers in developing areas. And, at a very simple level, we give them phones like this one. This will probably end up in New Guinea in a couple of weeks.
So that's just a basic smartphone, is it?
Yeah, well, we take it, we tweak the operating system, and then we put an application on it that is, we give this to 60-year-old farmers in the highlands of New Guinea that have never touched a phone before.
Wow.
And they use it for recording when they hand over goods. So we've had some pretty good results with improving incomes. Not from anything that we do, really, because we give them a method that they can record things, and then they can trust and cooperate better. And by trust and cooperation, that's how they get all the gains. So in New Guinea and Kenya, we've roughly seen the farmers triple their income in a single season just because they're working together better. So that's really what we do in normal times.
Wow. So does it work as a phone as well, so they can chat to each other?
Oh, yeah. And we typically, in, say, Ethiopia, we're working with World Food Program, and they pay the cost for the farmers to get the phones initially. And they create a good, cooperative around, in Ethiopia, it's coffee growers. And then once the base is set up, other farmers buy a phone to join in. So these ones, we get them in bulk out of China, and they're about $50. So, but,
wow.
They change the farmer's life. There's a really good video from Melinda Gates talking about how phones are the transformative technology for all the rural areas. The problem is when they get a phone out of the box, it doesn't really do anything that's relevant to them. Our farmers love music and YouTube, but those things don't help them work.
Yeah.
And a normal phone doesn't come with anything like that, and there's nothing that really helps them. So that's essentially what we do.
Yeah, fascinating. So you work with World Food Program. Who else do you partner with?
Yeah, World Food Program, USAID in Kenya, and we'll probably be doing a project in Thailand. We've got 4 countries. We're just starting now with Fair Trade Organisation. That'd be Uganda, Indonesia, Colombia, and Papua New Guinea. And then we've got CTA. There's quite a few other projects. So we've had projects completed in 7 countries now, and so we'll be up to 10 within the next few months.
Right. So is international poverty in agricultural areas a problem then?
Oh, it's devastating. It's the main issue is that the people at the bottom of the pyramid are so unempowered. They get squeezed by everyone all the way along. And even for the we work with a lot of development programs, and even for them, it's very hard to connect with and work with those people effectively. So, the reason World Food Program is partnering with Ethiopia is they're already investing millions of dollars, and they're not really sure what it means to the farmers. And the only way you can do that is by having real-time record keeping in the hands of the farmers.
I mean, what sort of incomes are we talking about in some of these poor rural areas? Say in rural Ethiopia, for example.
Oh, we're normally looking at people that are on tens of dollars a week. So they're in most of our farmers, they would be rarely earning more than $100 a week. And then sometimes they're in a couple of dollars a day territory. So they're sort of in that range.
And how does that manifest itself? Do they suffer from more diseases and things like that as a result of that, do you think?
Well, there's very little public support in those areas. So, one of the reasons we've been, watching your videos from right at the beginning is we're very cognizant of the risks in those areas, because, we see people dying from very curable diseases all the time, simply because there's no coverage into those places. And I personally think that the solution is you've got to lift their income level to the point where, there's a little bit of commercial incentive for people to get out there. That's really the problem. While they have no disposable income, Nobody's selling stuff into those areas. Nobody's going there. Once there's a little bit of motivation for outside parties, and that's what I really like about fair trade, they're trying to reach the remote communities, make sure they lift their areas, and then, the communities can buy solar lights, the community all develops, and that's when you see the medical services coming in. Until that happens, they're often very much on their own.
So a lot of these poorer farmers just don't have access to medical care then?
Oh, almost nothing. Yeah. We see people that, they might not die, but we see people get an infected cut and lose legs from it, simply because they don't get treatment quickly enough. I mean, nowadays, usually before it really seriously develops, they'll get to a hospital, but you often have horrific situations happening with farmers just because lack of service in the area, reluctance to get to it, and high cost. And it might not be the cost of medical treatment. It might be the cost of, we work with farmers in an island called Bougainville of Papua New Guinea, and to get to the hospital could cost them tens of dollars. So this could be weeks of income. And so they'll try to put off that rather than going and getting checked up. So
does this affect the health of their children? Does this affect the health of the children as well, do you think, David?
Yeah, very much. The one of the really troubling things when there's low income, I want to preface this by saying that all the people we work with, I think they're some of the best people in the world. Like the farmers that we see in remote villages are just, they will feed a stranger without thinking about it. You could turn up in their village, they'll feed you for a week without even asking for anything in return. There's just a beautiful giving society.
What sort of countries are we talking about, David, here? What areas specifically?
So we're currently working in Papua New Guinea, Sierra Leone. We have a team in Indonesia. We've got a slightly different
Ethiopia.
Ethiopia, Trinidad, and then the first project we did was Kenya, and the USAID project is taking us back to Kenya now.
Yeah. So I interrupted there. You're saying that these are some of the best people in the world, and they'll feed you in the villages and things.
Yeah, look, when you get into a really remote area, you just got the best people, but when their income is so low, it's often the children that suffer, and their knowledge of nutrition is not always the best, and kids left to their own devices won't always eat the healthiest things. So when there's no disposable income and no ability to trade and bring different food products in, you see really troubling nutritional levels, particularly in places like Ethiopia, where there's not a huge variety, and where commercial interests tend to steer the farmers towards monocrops. There isn't a lot of variety in food, so they depend on going to the market to get leafy vegetables and things like that. And when that transport stops, or whether there's no income, you end up seeing them eating grains for days on end, and that's got to have serious medical implications. Some of the more tropical locations, people generally in the farming areas, they have incredible variety of food, but then they still lack the access to medical facilities and others.
So children could potentially die then of simple things like diarrhea and chest infection and basic transmissible diseases, waterborne diseases.
Malaria particularly, dengue.
Malaria.
And then simple things just don't get diagnosed. And in these areas, people are kind of so used to the death that it's not that they care as much about their children as anyone. They just don't know what to do, and they sort of accept it as these things happen. And to be honest, that's not the case. That shouldn't be the case in this modern world. We can, the Western world, for very little cost, could resolve most of these, medical deficiencies in those areas. Access to basic food, it's really resolvable, and that's what our company is, dedicated to play our small part in doing.
So it almost sounds like all you need to do is give people a good diet and a good clean water supply, and they can maintain reasonable levels of health very often.
And it comes from them having a basic disposable income, because everyone needs a bit of money they can spend on things. They need to be able to, pay school fees and buy basic things. If they have got no income for that, they'll sell what they should be eating. If they've got a basic income earning crop like coffee, cacao are very good ones, and they've got some acres set aside for growing crops, they usually live really, really quite well. And it doesn't take too much to get people from that. And then rather than being a charity recipient, they're actually producing something to the economy of a country. So it's not only a problem that the world can solve, it's a problem that by solving there would be a lot more wealth and harmony and everything in the world. So yeah, it's something that we are committed very much to playing our part in.
So you're able to connect like producers and farmers directly with markets?
Yeah, well, we do too. Normally, we help the farmers collaborate. Like what we actually do goes over the head of a Western audience because it's something we solved like 100 years ago. It's that, I grew up on a wheat farm and we take wheat into a cooperative and we get a bit of paper and we don't think anything about the fact that I've given thousands of dollars of wheat over for a bit of paper. That won't happen in Papua New Guinea because they're pretty sure they'll never get paid. So by having a secure way of recording that and creating trust within the organization, you can do transactions that don't rely on cash being handed over immediately. And that's the main benefit. It takes a while for people to get their head around that, but that's a real gap in these regions. And so that's the major benefit. That gets them reliably earning. And then most of the other problems, people living in developed markets, we often in the West might think that they're less intelligent. They're not less intelligent. They just had less opportunity. So once they get a little bit of a break, giving them a simple phone, which is $50, that's enough to get them on a pathway to earning more. And once they do earn more, they know they want solar kits in their house so they don't have kerosene lamps. They know they should plant better food. They want to send their kids to school, but often they can't afford to. And they will solve most of the problems themselves if you help with their basic income.
So it actually sounds like in helping the individuals, you're actually helping the environment as well. If they're moving on to solar panels, solar lights, using technology appropriately rather than chopping down forests for wood and burning manure and all those kind of things are going to help the environment of the country and indeed the planet as well.
Well, yeah, I'm a huge fan of micro farming and diverse farming because it sustains an environment. And the crops that we like to work with, the coffee, cacao, virgin coconut oil, the sustainably caught fishing, they can all exist in a harmonious fashion. When the farmers can't make money from that, the first thing they do is sell the property, and the land gets cut down, it gets turned to, some sort of wide rice plantation or palm oil, which is one of the worst. And there's no coming back from that. Those farmers then drift off into the urban area, they become part of the urban poor, and you've forever destroyed the environment they're coming from. Whereas farmers can earn really good money from cacao and virgin coconut oil and things if they're just given a structure that lets them do that without, with a bit of security and in a reliable way.
So hopefully you've reduced the amount of palm oil production in the world to some extent anyway, which is, as we know, is a rather good thing.
It's probably pretty small as yet, but yeah, we certainly hope to reduce palm oil. And, and virgin coconut oil is acre by acre so much better.
Well, myself and everyone watching this video is grateful for whatever amount you've done, David, I'm sure. So are these poor producers and farmers, are they ever exploited by corrupt people in their own countries?
Oh, endemically. The poorer you are, the more people that are trying to squeeze you. And that's largely one of the things we try to avoid, that, everything they buy, they're getting at a highest price because people have got to bring it into the remote villages and they create little virtual monopolies. As soon as you get 100 farmers together in a cooperative, they can order solar lights as a group and they can get them probably for half the price that they would if they were traipsing into a village to buy one that was faulty. Same thing when they're selling. So everything happens better when they're part of a cooperative or group, and that's the key. And I learned that growing up myself. I mean, even in Australia, where we have 1,000-acre farms, we rely on cooperatives to get ourselves a good price and get the wheat to market and the wool board and lots of things. So the concept of farmers having some sort of collective power was second nature to me growing up. And And I spent a year in 96, 97 working for UNESCO in West Africa. And that was the first thing that struck me, that everyone does everything by themselves. They don't collaborate because of the lack of trust and cooperation. And so you've got 10 farmers selling the same thing in the market at the same time, all competing against themselves, all pushing the price down. Whereas if they could just collaborate on it, one person would take it in, they wouldn't be leaving their kids at home, they'd be controlling the price, which is what we try to do. We try to help them do.
So it's improving that peer-to-peer collaboration, but it's also cutting out the sort of corrupt officials who might come down from the city in their four-wheel drives and sort of try and control the situation and exploit the potential situation where there's a lack of education, lack of understanding, lack of cohesion.
Correct, yeah, and that happens everywhere. And you have some very good people that are trying to interrupt that corruption, but usually they have trouble dealing with the groups of farmers effectively. And that's the role we try to play: get a group together, and then an organisation, or our project in Madang in Papua New Guinea is a very ethical group. They own a taxi company in Port Moresby, and they're from that region, and they're going back to try to create a sustainable industry. But they could only manage a small group. We've allowed them to substantially increase the number of farmers that they can help in that community by giving them a platform that they can deal with them and a reliable way of ordering from them. So we don't do it alone. We sort of enable others to be more effective at what they're already doing.
I've seen this, of course, in other parts of the world. Working in rural Cambodia, I was driving with a friend of mine through past this massive sugar plantation, just kilometre after kilometre, and he said, I walked through here when it was forest, when he was a boy. And the villages have basically been strong-armed off the land. Corrupt officials have taken it over. The villagers struggle to grow basic foods, and it's all sugar for profit, which is bad for the planet, bad for the individuals. Heck, the sugar's even bad for us when we get it and eat it. It really is a lose-lose situation. So I think you've identified a really a common problem all around the world. It's tremendous that you're addressing this. Now, particularly with COVID-19, David, how do you see things panning out there for some of these poorer areas?
Look, as soon as this came out, we were terrified of the impact it was going to have, because unlike a lot of people, we spend actually a lot of time in the remote villages. So, to his great credit, one of my founders, John, lived in Kenya for a whole year in a house with no floor, and spent almost every night eating with the farmers so he could gain their trust and learn what they really wanted to do. So we spend a lot of time doing that. So we really understand the situation very well. What troubles me the most is there's almost no medical facilities in the remote villages. The farmers in the villages, they'll a couple of times a week take whatever they've got to sell, and they'll sit in a market for a day. And those markets are crowded, busy. They've got people coming from all different villages. They've got people coming from the urban areas to pick up produce and take it into the urban areas. If there's a virus spreading vector, it's those markets. And so we look at the poorer country, and so many, also another very important point of that is people depend on those markets being open, and they don't have too long that they can survive if you shut the markets. So you've got this terrible situation for governments. Like, they should lock down to stop the spread of the virus, but if they shut the markets, then the people in urban areas are without food in days. And there's an interesting thing that's sort of going on in the food supply in the urban areas, but then the farmers also lose their income, and we see the impact of that first on when farmers take a little bit of hit of the income. In a drought or a volcano in Bali, which we dealt with, they only need a couple of months, and it will take them years to recover because they're so close to the breadline that, and the debt. There's a really horrible situation with like loan sharks in these areas. The only way a small farmer can get credit is from people that are charging incredible rates of interest, and they're often connected with human trafficking and other very bad things. So once farmers get into debt, it's just a spiral into a situation no one can, nobody in the West can really imagine how difficult their situation is. So you have to keep the farmers making an income, and you have to keep the full supply of food into the urban centres. Now, Indonesia is very interesting. So like a city like Jakarta is a massive population, and there's really two food supply chains. There's the more formal one that's going into the supermarkets and convenience stores, and and the wealthy people will get that. But then there's a sort of a very informal one which goes from the village to a market to another market and into low-cost food markets. That's really fragile. That relies on a lot of people making very small margins, bringing food from here to there and getting it to that places. As soon as that stops, the poorer people in the urban area like Jakarta, they won't be able to get food. And things go...
They can't afford to go to the supermarket.
Yeah, they might be able to get a little, but then that drives the price up. And there's a lot of wealthy people in Jakarta. Most of the people are fairly well off in Jakarta, but then you have millions of very poor people. And once there's a demand on food supply, most people will be okay, but that bottom portion of society, they're going to get hit so hard. And we're only, we're in a lot of these countries that are just starting to get hit, or starting to realise the extent of the virus. And I think the food supply chain issues are going to be devastating in those areas. I'm genuinely afraid that we'll see deaths and the long-term effects of malnutrition on people that just couldn't afford to eat properly through this year. So yeah, it's a really dire situation, and a horrible choice for a government too. I put myself in the government of South Sudan, for example. I mean, what do you really do? They're not getting enough support from aid organisations because everyone's focused everywhere else at the moment. Normally in a disaster, the world comes to rescue these places. That's not happening this time. They're largely left to their own devices, so they've got a horrible choice with no good answer.
So, I mean, this is quite a frightening scenario. It almost sounds like more people could potentially die of the consequences, like malnutrition, of this virus, rather than actually die of the virus itself. And
the economic, the malnutrition, there will be actual starvation in some areas that are more desertified. The semi-desert areas, there will be actual starvation, I think. And then the economic impact, because the bottom of society always gets hit the worst with that. Other people find the way out, but the supplies and things that are getting to the bottom of society, they'll get cut in a really strict economic. And we're only, again, right at the front of that, and we're already seeing the impacts of it in the places we are, and I can't imagine how it's going to accelerate through this year. So
But it does sound like it could be good for people traffickers, loan sharks, and corrupt government officials.
Yeah, they're ever present. And that's, those issues are what keeps these areas impoverished, right? There's a lot of parasites, looking to live off those that work very hard in every society, and that's extreme situation in underdeveloped countries that don't have good policing and authority and controls against corruption, which is a big percentage of the world's population. What people don't realise is, over a third of our world's population still lives in pretty extreme poverty and have almost no power to do anything about that. They're literally trapped and at the mercy of whatever government they've got, and there's no ability for them to find their way out of that. So yeah, those things are going to get particularly bad during this year.
Trying to contain my anger just thinking about it, to be quite honest. It's all these good hard-working people are exploited by a minority of parasitic people traffickers, loan sharks, and corrupt officials is just such an outrage, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. And the Western world doesn't. Just another interesting anecdote. Coffee, right? I mean, we know in the last 30 years how much the price of coffee has gone up for us, because we used to, buy tin coffee. Or our family used to buy tin coffee, and now we think nothing about spending $5 at a boutique coffee store. Coffee prices have hardly changed in 30 years at the source. So while the value has come up, the major coffee and cacao buyers have essentially kept the prices flat for those that are producing it. And a lot of their costs have gone up in that time. So we're not seeing a fair distribution of wealth. We're seeing those with power, using their power to keep the very bottom of society oppressed and in their situation, because that's what drives better profits.
It's almost like a North Korean situation, isn't it, where you've got a group of people that just have no ability to help themselves in any way.
No, they just have to go with what they do, and that's many of the organisations we work with, and Fair Trade is absolutely doing that. World Food Programme's absolutely, at the base of what they're trying to do is get that bottom of society out of poverty. And once you do that, you can really transform society, because then they have a little bit of power. They can start to influence the voting process, and you can eventually alter the corruption of the country. So there is a path out of this. Our company exclusively works on projects that impact the UN Sustainable Development Goals, and the first one of those is no poverty, and everything else flows from that. You have to stop poverty at its source, and from what we've seen, it really can be solved. You really can address poverty, because we've done it in small situations, and hopefully in the coming years we'll be doing it in bigger and bigger communities.
And you're giving this help and this liaison directly with the poor people themselves, rather than going through top-down government approaches, which would have to go through several layers of bureaucracy and corruption before it managed to trickle down to the poor people. You're going directly to the source of the problem.
Yeah, that's right. When we first started, we had 3 projects. One was Kenya, one was Papua New Guinea, and the other one I'm not going to mention because we made the mistake of dealing with the government.
Yep.
And we spent incredible amount of time going back and forward in and out of the country, and then just gave up. So we've learned the hard way that you just make a partner that's philanthropic, that's working with us, and then go in at the grassroots, spend time in the villages, make sure you understand the problem. Get a really good case study for the first thing, and then others will join it. Once you show them the pattern, like I say, some of these people, some of the people we've met would be doctors or lawyers if they'd grown up in another environment. They're just as capable of solving all their problems as we are. They just need that first step.
And indeed still could be.
And that's what we certainly hope to do. We see some really promising people, and with their children, they want their children to go to school. They don't want their children to work on the farm. It's a natural instinct. It's out of absolute necessity that their children might not eat if they're not helping out with the work. So again, getting a little bit more of the disposable income vastly changes that situation.
I think you used a key phrase there. And I know we're not talking about details or politics, but you actually, to say we actually made the mistake of trying to work with the government. So some of these governments are just so corrupt. There's no point trying to work with the government. So they're just vested interest. This is a cooperation between people like you and me as ordinary guys with ordinary people in these villages. We don't need these corrupt government officials to get in our way. They're just part of the parasitic class, really, aren't they?
Absolutely, and not always for malicious reasons. Sometimes they're just so bureaucratic because they get their salary for doing their job. They're not motivated to really change things in the country, particularly the bureaucratic class in the government. So it's not that they're necessarily malicious. Sometimes they very much are, but sometimes they're just not motivated to drive the change.
Yeah, I think we've all worked with that before, unfortunately. So I like this practical approach. So it's direct links to the people that need the help. It's introduction of relatively small amounts of money, like $50 for a phone. It's establishing electronic records of verifying transactions and electronic records of guaranteeing payment. And it's giving a bit of empowerment that generates a bit of income, that starts the educational process, that attracts healthcare to the area, and that can start to engage people in the political process. I mean, is that sort of your pragmatic approach to world poverty, really?
Yeah, I think that's the key. I mean, and you know, it's not us. It's again, Melinda Gates had an excellent video on this, which is, you know, a phone can transform someone's life.
Yeah.
And the key is it can't be just any phone, because they'll use it for music and they won't figure the other stuff. It's just got to be something that does what they need to do, which is keeping some records and a kind of, it's not really mobile money, but it acts like that. So they can put their cocoa beans into the cooperative, they'll ferment them and sell them, and then they can take out money slowly, because there's a very big problem with cash in a lot of this world too, that, you know, in Papua New Guinea, most of our farmers, or a majority of our farmers, are women, and they're very reluctant to bring large amounts of cash home. One, they might get robbed on the way back, and then when they bring it home, people get drunk and want to have a party, and they have got very little defense against that. So just basic banking services is so transformative, and you can do that in a very simple way. And then the next step from that is we're working with financial service providers, so that now we've got a record of the farmers bringing in cocoa every time. Suddenly they can get a good loan from a real bank at a repayable interest rate, so you can cut out the loan sharks. And
real money. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So the phones come preloaded with this software and these apps ready to rock and roll there, David.
Yeah. We basically tweak the Android operating system so it can do, because we need to work in areas where there's no communications, and we need to be able to lock down the phones a bit securely, and then we make it so it boots up straight into the application, so they don't have to deal with multiple passwords and things.
Yeah.
And then the actual application, the icons on it, they're replaceable, so we can push down one for, say, malaria, dengue tracking, and collect our information from that. So it's designed so it slowly extends the features it can do. So we hope to provide, you know, health advice and others, but, you know, right now we're just dealing with the farm, agricultural productivity is our main objective. But in the long term, finance and medical advice and children's education, all those can be delivered through the same phone. So quite transformative.
It's amazing, isn't it? So you could tell them how to grow better crops, how to keep the children healthy, how to treat basic medical illnesses, things like diarrhea and vomiting, by giving them oral rehydration salts.
Exactly.
And then moving on to more educational projects and developing a professional class really within that society.
Yeah, absolutely. And they have an incredible appetite for that. Like, we get the most heartwarming comments from them as to, you know, this phone has done more for me than all them other bastards did in last 20 years. So would I do anything else in the world? No. After dealing with such wonderful people that just, you know, really just need a small bit of help or a small bit of assistance, and they'll take it from there. We see a very bright future, but, you know, I only wish we could get into more countries and reach more people.
So is the organization growing?
Oh, rapidly. Yeah. And unfortunately we saw COVID coming, and we were preparing our solution to play a role in allowing farmers to have an alternative to the markets in this time. So I hope during this year we can at least, you know, give some areas the option of farmer getting produce directly picked up, because once they've said, I've got cocoa beans or I've got mangoes in the phone, there's no reason we can't get someone to come and pick it up rather than expose the village. So I hope we can play an important role in reducing the spread of COVID as well.
Absolutely. So things like targeted pickups that can be arranged by these phones can stop the people, you know. So lorry drivers are, of course, a classic vector of illness all around the world. That's how AIDS traveled around Africa. It was down the truck routes, wasn't it? So and truck drivers in Africa are spreading COVID as we talk, unfortunately. So to have ways to pick things up in a hygienic, efficient way is potentially transformative. I agree. Excellent.
Yeah, we've got a bunch of training programs and informational posters and stuff that I shared with you that we're already putting out to explain to people, you know, how to pick up parcels, how to wash your hands after it. So, you know, and again, they're pretty good at understanding that. We got that going into a few languages now, and the pickup has been really good. They, like, again, intelligence is there. The poster with the exponential growth.
Yeah.
90% of people get that straight away.
Have you actually done some surveys to check on levels of understanding of that?
Sorry?
So you've like talked to people and you like showing people the post and say, right, tell me what it means, mate.
Tell me what
can
it
you?
means, yeah. Yeah,
Yeah,
it's about being graphical. So, if
yeah.
it's images and it's an infographic and it's done in the right way, and Petra Schneider, she's worked in development programs from Bali for decades now, so she understands this really well, and she's brilliant at doing the infographics. And
I see the infographic lady.
Yeah, because she's lived in Bali for so long, she understands how you convey it. So she just does an absolutely brilliant job of these infographics, but also our training programs and the user experience in our application. They're all courtesy of Petra's incredible insight into how to take something that we're used to and make it comprehensible from someone that's never seen it before. So she's a genius at that.
So these infographics are just turned into posters and things in country, are they, David?
Yeah, we just get them printed in country. We've got 60 or so of them we're making for Papua New Guinea now, so they'll be going up in the next couple of days.
Right.
And then we're reaching out to works to translate them, so we'll have them in Ethiopia in a few weeks as well.
Wow.
Very easy. Every country can get these printed in the cities. You don't need to do them. You don't need to ship stuff in. That's one of my pet hates that,
Yeah.
You often see things like mosquito nets that come from China and go to America and then come back to Cambodia.
Yeah.
There's a lot of inefficiencies that go on in charity. Very often you can get stuff done on the ground in the field, and that stimulates the local economy as well. So we try to do that wherever possible.
So, like, if someone in India wanted copies of these posters, you could just send them the files, absolutely, and they could get them printed up locally and translated locally.
We'd love them to do that. Yeah, it'd be the more we can spread this, the more people we can help. Yeah.
So could you actually send this out in like Illustrator files or something that people could work on and translate in on their own computers?
Absolutely, we have all that. Yeah.
Well, and of course we will put a link to that.
Yeah. Please do. We can share that, and we're making more all the time. And there's a whole lot of other. There's a whole other set of infographics we've done about how to convert a regular market into a digital one or a safe one. So there's a separate series that's more about how to transform a marketplace, which I think is probably the key that developing countries need to look at the moment. How do you, apart from the when you're talking a really rural area, apart from those farmers markets, they really stay in their villages a lot. There's a bit of workers moving around, but that's, they'll go for a month. The regular to and from traffic, and what you need to stop is the shipment, the movement of goods and the people going into those markets. If you can do that, I think, you don't stop the spread, but you at least bring it down to a moderate, you bring it down by a large factor. So I think that's one of the ones that many countries have to focus on.
It really is knowledge is power. Knowledge is power, isn't it? You're giving people these basically simple infographics that they can understand anyway, but easily to translate into their own language, relatively cheap to distribute, get them out everywhere, empower people to make good decisions in the short term, but yet still using a fairly similar strategy for longer term development. We've got the acute need and the longer term need, and it's the two can kind of go together.
That's one of my big hopes. We've got, as much as I said, we don't like dealing with governments. For the COVID response, we have to, because they're the only, to shut down markets, you need government cooperation. So we've got proposals into 6 countries at the moment at a government level to help them shut down markets. But that comes with a really long-term benefits. Some governments have got funding for COVID, for COVID emergency. It shows their population they're doing something, to address the issue now, which, a lot of governments have this popularity issue, right? They need the very lowest of society to understand what they're doing, and mostly those people can't see anything. So, creating an ability to keep the food supply moving is critical to them. But then once they do that, for years after, that's going to have a benefit, because you can more efficiently move goods around your country. One of the things that we are continually troubled by is the amount of wastage that occurs in developing nations. You'll see, good food spoiling just because there's too much in one area and it doesn't make it to the other area. And a little bit of information can, if I've got excess tomatoes here, and I know that somewhere else doesn't have them, then I can get them there. But the problem is they don't know where to take them. And if they take them to the wrong market, then everyone's got tomatoes at that market. So a little bit of information and digitization of the food supply systems, and you can cut, the whole how do you feed the world in 2050, the answer to that is stop wasting food.
Yeah.
It's really simple.
And when there's ample food, target it to the areas that need it precisely.
Yeah, just move it around more efficiently and prioritize people that are growing high value, high nutrition food. And the more you can move it around, the more you prioritize that. So again, it's a little bit of information and just more efficient moving of food, which is all about information.
Yeah, absolutely.
And this is all stuff that we've been, again, in our societies, we've grown up with this that was solved 100 years ago. So we don't realize this is the problem that they're suffering with. And even some of the development organizations don't quite twig to what the root cause problem is.
And this is a real bottom-up empowerment approach. This is empowerment, not aid, isn't it?
Yeah, we don't believe in aid. We've had situations where people have asked for funding for things. We do our thing because we want to see them lift themselves out of poverty. We don't want to be the ones doing it. We'll get the credit for giving them the tool, but we don't want to be seen as doing them, or we don't want to be. We don't want them to view us as helping them. We want to view them to view that I did it. I got a tool, and then I did it myself, because that will lead to them doing the next thing. And then encourage
the best tool in the world at the moment is the mobile phone properly set up.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So is there most of these poor areas have sort of some sort of signal, do they, David?
They're pretty. That's one of the important things we had to do, and why we had to tweak the operating system on the phone, because most of the time they don't, and they also don't always have the ability to pay for their data plan or something. So the phone has to work so it's offline most of the time. And then when it does get one bar of signal, or where they're near Wi-Fi, it'll send the transactions. So it works fundamentally different to normal phones in that respect. And to do that, you have to re-engineer the whole thing from the ground up.
Wow. It sounds like you've got some clever techies working with you. Or maybe you are a clever techie.
Yeah, like our team actually hail from the dark side. We all come from very big investment banking backgrounds. By Goldman Sachs, Lehman Brothers, our technical team all hails from that environment.
Really?
And we found the light.
I was just going to say that you're on the road to Damascus and you saw a bright light.
Yeah. It's a very strange set of circumstances that brought us here, but no one would go back. And to engineer something at this level, you really do need extremely capable people. So the technical people in our team have all been senior vice presidents at major investment banks with huge teams under them, and now they're working for a fraction of that because they feel they're doing something that they'll be proud to tell their grandparents about, and proud to tell their grandchildren about. And I don't think anyone's particularly proud to tell their grandchildren that they worked in banking for all their career.
You know what I did, son? I spent all my life exploiting people and making a huge amount of money for myself. That's my claim to fame.
Yeah, exactly. So
yeah, when you were telling me that, David, when you get that kind of goosebumpy feeling all over you, when you've got really high caliber people like that who are giving that up to help, good people around the world that just need that small leg up. It's just it's just a great feeling,
I think if more people actually got out, we all travel a lot, so how many people go to Thailand or Bali for a holiday, but how many people actually spend time in a village with the people and see their life? And I think if more people did that, more people would prefer to do this, because the world really can change. Like the whole world can change if we lift the bottom of society, rather than them costing us money. They're producing, they're making better coffee, they're making better cacao, like everyone benefits. And rather than forgetting them, lifting them up a bit makes the whole world a better place. And that's better, that's a better thing to do than, any high income job.
And it's also improving the environment by having less palm oil.
Oh yeah, less palm oil. There's a whole
and 1,000 other examples as well, of course.
Exactly, yeah. Sustainable fisheries. I'm really proud of a project we're doing in Papua New Guinea to tag. There's an organisation we're helping there called Real that are hoping to tag every fish that's caught in New Guinea, so they can tell that they're sustainably line caught for export markets. So everyone will have an IoT tag on it. So there's lots of things that can be done like this that will help the farmers and improve the food supply, and people on our side of the world get better food, and we know the origin of it, which is, it's another,
and preserve the ecosystem as well.
Absolutely, yeah.
David, that's incredible. I think what I'll do is I'll put that up now, and if anyone's got to the end of this talk, well done. I don't know how long. It seems like a few seconds to me, but it was probably longer. And I'll at some point, whether I've done it when you watch this or not, I'm going to do a video of the infographics related to COVID-19 that David and AgUnity have supplied, and I'm also very interested to see some of your other infographics as well. I think they're really part of the way ahead. I think it's brilliant.
Well, thank you very much, John. I'll be sure to pass on everything. I'll keep you updated as to what we're doing.
We'll put links on the bottom, and people can email you with contributions and things. I'm sure
Oh, thank you very much. We greatly appreciate
it. As long as you give a link, there'll be
Yep.
I'm sure there's ways for people to get involved if on the links that you.
We have a response. We have a response links because we get a lot of people coming at the moment. We got a lot of people actually volunteering work for equity or work for free at the moment because they've got nothing else to do. And what I often say is, what are you going to tell your grandchildren you did during COVID, right? I stayed at home and played Minecraft, or I tried to contribute something. So, yeah.
And going to these poorer areas and seeing how people live, if you haven't experienced it before, and it sounds like this is what happened to you and your other people that work with you. They've had this sort of, once they've experienced that and they see the nature of reality, that can actually change your outlook on life for the rest of your life, can't it? Just that experience.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I mean, you're not so keen to upgrade your car every 5 years because, let's face it doesn't really matter. The old one still works. There's a lot of stuff we do in Western societies that just doesn't matter. And the more you see the way they live and what's real in life, and the other very important thing is the happiness of these people.
Yeah.
Like, Ghana's a great example. They're some of the happiest people in the world, living in the most squalid conditions. They just are fundamentally happy. And they don't need much to be that. And so a lot of, having worked in big banking in really with extremely wealthy people, they can earn $1 million a year. They're still not happy. It's all about what you do and what you value that makes, makes you truly happy in life.
Yeah, absolutely. Good. Thank you, David. Appreciate that. Wonderful.
Thank you, Zed. And just on that topic, John.
It's brilliant. Yeah, thank you very much. Yeah.
Just on that topic, I want to say thank you because I think what you're doing has been absolutely invaluable throughout this whole pandemic. So it's an honour to speak to you.
Well, I don't think it's an honour, David, but I'll certainly leave that bit in. Thanks for the plug.
Okay. Thank you very much, John. Bye.
Yeah. No, bye, David. That's great, David. Thanks. Fantastic.
So I've stopped recording.